The desperate message. The room was cold, dimly lit by the pale glow of holographic screens. The alien council sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the message repeating over and over. 3 simple words echoed in the chamber. Mercy. Please stop them. High Chancellor Vorn leaned forward, his claws tapping nervously against the smooth table. His deep blue scales shimmered faintly under the light, but there was no pride in his appearance today. Fear clouded his features. Who sent this? Vorn's voice cracked slightly. The communications officer hesitated. It came from the Xarlan system, from the battleground there. Vorn's heart sank. Xarlan was not just any system. It was home to the Empire's strongest fleet. The soldiers stationed there were the pride of their species, veterans of countless wars. If they were asking for mercy, something was terribly wrong. A tall, thin alien stood from the council table. General Rax, known for his cold demeanor, narrowed his dark eyes at the display. This must be a mistake. The Xarlan forces are the finest in the galaxy. Who could possibly? He stopped mid-sentence as the message flashed again. A faint image accompanied the words this time. A shattered warship drifting lifelessly in space. Bird marks covered its hull. Rax's eyes widened. This can't be right. A younger alien, Advisor Kell, leaned in closer. The ship is Tarlonian. That's one of our war carriers. It's been destroyed. The room fell into stunned silence. Vorn exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Who could do this to Xarlan forces? His voice trembled. The communications officer cleared his throat. There's more. A second message followed the first, this one filled with distorted screams. Explosions roared in the background, and alien voices cried out, begging for help. The sound faded abruptly, leaving only static behind. Advisor Kell's green skin paled. What are we facing? The answer came from the shadows, a soft but grim whisper. Humans. Heads turned toward the corner of the chamber. An elder alien, once a diplomat to the human colonies, stepped forward. His eyes bore the look of someone who had seen too much. Humans, Rax sneered. Impossible. They're from a death world. Yes, they are tough. But their technology is primitive. We've seen it. They don't stand a chance against us. The elder's gaze did not waver. You're wrong, General. Their technology was primitive. But humans are not like us. They don't play by the same rules. When you pushed them, you made a mistake. Vorn shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mistake? We offered them peace. We even shared minor technology to help them. What mistake did we make? The elder's voice was heavy. You didn't respect them. You treated them as inferior. But humans, they adapt. Faster than any species I've ever known. You gave them a glimpse of our power. And now, they're using it against us. A heavy silence followed his words. Rax crossed his arms, shaking his head. I don't believe it. Xarlan forces cannot lose to a species that was flying basic starships a decade ago. The elder stepped closer to the table. General, let me ask you this. How many soldiers did you send to the human colonies after their initial resistance? Rax's face twisted in confusion. 2 battalions. We expected to crush them easily. The elder's eyes narrowed. And how many returned? Rax opened his mouth to speak but said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any words could. Vorn's voice broke the tension. If the humans are responsible for this, we must know why. What could drive them to such destruction? The elder let out a slow breath. Survival. They see war differently. To them, it's not about honor or conquest. It's about making sure no one hurts them again. Every loss they suffered only made them more dangerous. Advisor Kell glanced nervously at the hologram. Chancellor, what do we do now? Vorn's eyes locked onto the drifting warship in the image. There were no survivors. We wait, and we pray that message wasn't their final warning. The room dimmed further as the hologram faded. In the silence, The words still echoed. Mercy, please stop them. The Deathworlders' arrival. The skies above Zarnath Prime shimmered as alien vessels patrolled in tight formations, their sleek hulls reflecting the distant light of the system's twin suns. The air of confidence within the command center was palpable. The Zarnathians were proud, having held dominion over this sector for centuries. They had subdued countless species and built an empire upon the shattered remains of those who dared to resist. That was until the humans arrived. It began like all the others, a diplomatic delegation, small and seemingly fragile, arriving with humble words and open hands. Their ships were bulky, uninspired by the sleek designs of more advanced species. The humans carried themselves with respect, but lacked the refined grace of the galactic elites. Many laughed at their clumsy attempts to negotiate, dismissing their presence as little more than an annoyance. General Rax was among those who had mocked them. Primitive creatures, he had said, watching from the observation deck as human ships docked at the orbital station. They barely understand the technology we gifted them. They'll never survive out here. But there was something about the way the humans looked at the galaxy, something unsettling. Unlike other species, they didn't seem intimidated by the vastness of space or the overwhelming power the Zarnathians flaunted. Instead, they observed in silence, listening intently and asking questions that revealed a sharp, calculating nature beneath their surface politeness. "They're studying us," Advisor Kell had warned, but his voice was brushed aside. Months passed, and the humans quietly expanded their territory. Small settlements appeared on inhospitable planets that no other species dared to colonize. They transformed barren wastelands into thriving outposts, adapting faster than anyone anticipated. Still, the Zarnathians watched with disinterest. It wasn't until the first skirmish that things began to shift. A minor Zarnathian patrol encountered a human cargo ship near the edges of contested space. The humans refused inspection, prompting the patrol to open fire. What should have been an easy victory turned into chaos. The cargo ship exploded in a violent blaze, but not before launching escape pods toward a nearby asteroid field. Hours later, the patrol vanished without a trace. The incident was dismissed, pirates, perhaps, or a navigational error. But over the next few weeks, more patrols disappeared. Each time, the last transmission was the same, the faint sound of gunfire and human voices barking orders. General Rax was furious. He dispatched 2 full battalions to subdue the nearest human outpost, determined to crush the insolent species before their defiance spread. Zarnathian warships descended on the colony with overwhelming force. The battle was brief, and soon the alien forces left behind nothing but ashes. Or so they thought. When Rax returned to Zarnath Prime, his fleet received an urgent transmission. Satellite imagery revealed that only days after the attack, the human colony was not just rebuilding, it had expanded. New structures dotted the landscape, and anti-aircraft defenses now lined the outer perimeter. "They learned," Advisor Kell muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "They studied the wreckage and improved their defenses." "Impossible," Rax growled. "No species learns that fast." But the evidence was undeniable. The humans weren't just recovering. They were adapting, growing stronger with every skirmish. Reports flooded in from other colonies, stories of human engineers salvaging Zarnathian technology, replicating it, and deploying it in new and unpredictable ways. Then came the assault on Xarlan. In a bold and unthinkable move, the humans launched a direct attack on one of the Zarnathian Empire's most fortified systems. The defenses were considered impenetrable, guarded by some of the best soldiers the Empire had to offer. Yet within hours, Xarlan's proud fleet was reduced to scrap floating in the void. Survivors described the battle as a nightmare. Human ships darted through enemy fire with ruthless precision, using guerrilla tactics that left the Zarnathians scrambling to respond. "They don't fight like us," one wounded soldier recalled, trembling in his hospital bed. "They fight like they have nothing to lose and everything to gain." General Rax stood motionless in the command center, his confidence eroding with each new report. The humans were no longer an annoyance. They were a threat. And for the first time in his long military career, Rax felt fear. Mercy, please stop them. The message repeated once more, but this time, Rax understood. This was not a plea from a weak species. It was the cry of an empire on the brink of collapse, standing helpless before the relentless advance of Deathworlders. The first strike. The calm of space was shattered by the roar of plasma fire as the Zarnathian dreadnought Glorious Dominion unleashed a barrage against the human colony below. Fiery streaks rained down, consuming the outpost in brilliant explosions visible even from orbit. On the bridge of the dreadnought, General Rax stood with his arms crossed, watching the devastation unfold with a grim sense of satisfaction. "They'll learn their place," he muttered, turning to his officers. "Sweep the area. I want nothing left standing." The Zarnathians had been here before, many times, on many worlds. Resistance was always crushed beneath the might of their fleets. It was simply the way of the galaxy. Rax saw no reason this time would be different. But below, beneath the layers of smoke and destruction, the humans were already moving. Deep in the colony's underground bunker, Captain Elias Cade knelt beside his team. The colony's outer defenses were gone, but their fighting spirit remained intact. Cade's face was smudged with soot, and his uniform was tattered, but his eyes burned with focus. "They think we're finished," he said, voice low but firm. "Let's make sure they regret that mistake." Cade tapped the side of his helmet, opening a secure channel. "All squads, initiate Plan Ironclad. Silent protocol. We hit them where it hurts." Across the smoldering ruins, concealed anti-air turrets emerged from beneath debris, tracking the enemy ships. Human engineers had buried them there weeks prior. Hidden weapons that now locked onto their targets with chilling precision. The first strike was devastating. Missiles screamed upward, piercing the Zarnathian blockade. 3 cruisers exploded in fiery bursts, their shattered remains drifting into the void. On the bridge of the Glorious Dominion, alarms blared. Officers scrambled to respond, but Rax froze. His eyes widened as he watched his warships crumble like paper under the surprise counterattack. "How?" he whispered. The humans had set a trap. But the assault was far from over. Cade's squad moved swiftly, using narrow maintenance tunnels to bypass the destruction above. They emerged at the colony's spaceport, where the Zarnathians had landed ground forces to occupy what they thought was a defenseless city. They were wrong. Human soldiers, armed with salvaged alien weapons, struck fast and without mercy. Their tactics were brutal. Quick ambushes, explosive charges planted on key supply lines, and sniper fire that picked off officers with surgical precision. The Zarnathians had superior numbers, but numbers meant little against human adaptability. The battlefield was not a contest of strength. It was a game of survival, and no species knew survival like Deathworlders. By nightfall, the colony's ruins belonged to humanity once more. General Rax paced furiously aboard his flagship. "Deploy reinforcements. I want that colony erased from existence." But even as he spoke, another officer rushed to his side, pale and shaking. "Sir, we've lost contact with our Eastern Battalion." Rax's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. They had full air support." The officer swallowed hard. "That's just it, sir. They reported interference. Human jamming signals. Then nothing." Silence filled the bridge. Rax clenched his fists. He realized, far too late, what was happening. The humans weren't defending their colony. They were hunting the hunters. In the distant corridors of space, more human ships emerged from hidden positions, flanking the remaining Zarnathian fleet. The Deathworlders didn't fight fair. They fought to win. And they never stopped coming. As the final Zarnathian cruiser crumbled beneath human firepower, Rax stared blankly at the wreckage. For the first time in his long career, he felt powerless. Cade's voice crackled through intercepted channels. "Next time, General. Don't start a war you can't finish." The unstoppable advance. The stars shimmered cold and distant over the war-torn sector as the Zarnathian Empire reeled from its unexpected losses. The once proud fleets that had dominated this region of space were now scattered wreckage, drifting silently among the asteroid belts. From the high command chambers of Zarneth Prime, panic spread like wildfire. News of the disastrous defeat at the human colony reached every corner of the Empire. The attack wasn't an isolated incident. Within days, 3 more Zarnathian outposts fell to coordinated human strikes. Each assault was executed with surgical precision, leaving no survivors to explain how the humans had done it. General Rax stood before the High Council, his pride battered and scarred. He no longer carried the same confidence that once defined him. Maps of the sector flickered on the holotable, showing red human-controlled zones spreading like wildfire across the galactic frontier. "This cannot be happening," one of the council elders hissed. "We are the Zarnathian Empire. We've conquered countless worlds. How can a Deathworld species, of all things, drive us to this point?" Rax clenched his jaw. "They don't fight like the others. Humans don't care about territory or honor. They dismantle our forces and disappear before we can retaliate. Every time we think we've cornered them, they slip through and strike somewhere else." The room fell silent. Advisor Kell, sitting at the far end of the chamber, leaned forward. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed his unease. "It's not just their tactics, General. It's what they are. Deathworlders, species born on harsh, unforgiving planets. Their entire evolution was shaped by survival against forces meant to destroy them. For humans, war isn't a disruption of peace. It's a return to their roots." Rax's gaze darkened, "And we gave them a reason to return to those roots." In the outer sectors, human fleets surged forward. Unlike the slow, methodical expansions of typical empires, humanity's advance came in waves, swift and unpredictable. Their ships didn't resemble the polished, elegant crafts of the Zarnathians. Human vessels were rough, heavily armored, and designed to withstand punishment. They weren't built for beauty. They were built to survive. Zarnathian defenses fell one after another, crumbling beneath relentless assaults that left no time to regroup. On the surface of Ralos IV, the Empire's third-largest military outpost, the ground trembled as human dropships descended through the clouds. Colonel Drevis, a veteran Zarnathian commander, stood at the forward base watching the dark shapes emerge from the sky. The humans didn't send diplomats or warnings. They came in silence, using the shadows to mask their numbers. Drevis barked orders to his soldiers, rallying his defenses. Massive artillery cannons rotated to face the incoming fleet, while hundreds of soldiers took up defensive positions along the walls. "Hold the line," Drevis shouted. "They may have caught us off guard before, but not today. Let them come." The first clash was brutal. Human infantry, wearing exosuits scavenged from previous battles, charged the walls like a relentless tide. Their weapons were a mix of alien technology and human ingenuity, firing projectiles that tore through Zarnathian armor as if it were paper. The Zarnathians fired back, cutting down the first wave, but the humans didn't retreat. Drevis watched in disbelief as they adapted mid-battle. Human soldiers ducked into cover, using smoke grenades and makeshift shields to block incoming fire. Snipers hidden in the distant cliffs began picking off Zarnathian officers one by one, causing confusion among the ranks. Even when wounded, the humans kept fighting. Drevis realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't a battle of strength. It was a test of endurance, and no species endured like Deathworlders. By the time night fell, Ralos IV was silent. Smoke drifted over the battlefield as human forces secured the outpost. Colonel Drevis' final transmission echoed across the Zarnathian channels. "They're not soldiers. They're survivors, and they won't stop." In the days that followed, humanity's advance reached the core worlds of the Zarnathian Empire. Entire fleets abandoned their posts, choosing to retreat rather than face the Deathworlders in open combat. But humanity's wrath wasn't born from greed or conquest. It was retaliation, a warning to any species that believed they could subjugate Earth. In the depths of space, aboard the lead human battleship Vindicator, Captain Elias Cade stood before his crew. The stars stretched endlessly before them, but the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Cade's voice echoed through the command deck. They wanted to break us. Now we show them what Deathworlders can do. The human fleet pushed forward, unrelenting. The unstoppable advance had only just begun. The plea for mercy. The war had turned. What once seemed like a mere conflict, an empire quelling an uprising, had spiraled into something far worse. Entire sectors of Zarnathian space now lay in ruins, their defenses shattered, their proud warships reduced to drifting wreckage. The humans didn't conquer territory in the traditional sense. They didn't plant flags or issue declarations of victory. They simply kept moving forward. High Chancellor Vorn stood alone in the grand chamber of Zarnath Prime's central spire, gazing out at the stars. The twin moons hung low over the capital city, but their light brought him no comfort. In the distance, he could see the burning trails of evacuation ships leaving the atmosphere. They weren't soldiers or politicians. They were civilians, desperate to escape before the inevitable arrival of human forces. A soft chime echoed in the chamber, drawing Vorn's attention to the central holodeble. Advisor Kell's face flickered into view, his expression grim. "They've reached the outer colonies," Kell said quietly. "No resistance. Our fleets, they didn't even engage." Vorn's claws tightened around the edge of the table. "Deserters." Kell hesitated. "No, Chancellor. They surrendered the moment human ships arrived." The word hung heavy in the air. For the first time in living memory, the Zarnathian Empire, the greatest power in the galaxy, was surrendering without a fight. Vorn's gaze drifted to the far side of the chamber, where General Rax stood silently, his armor tarnished and his eyes hollow. The once proud warrior had not spoken since his return from the front lines. Rax's forces had been among the first to fall, and though he survived, something inside him had broken. "They don't stop," Rax finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even when you think they've won, they keep pushing. There's no celebration, no declaration of victory. They just keep coming." Vorn exhaled slowly, his breath trembling. "We need to end this. We cannot hold Zarnath Prime if they reach the core systems." Kell nodded solemnly. "I've taken the liberty of drafting a formal surrender. Full withdrawal from contested space, reparations, technology transfers, whatever they demand." For a brief moment, hope flickered in Vorn's chest. Perhaps this could end without the complete collapse of the Empire. "Send it," Vorn ordered. Kell bowed his head. "I will reach out to the human fleet directly." But before the connection could close, a faint transmission interrupted the holodeble. A single message, carried across encrypted channels. The source, unknown. 3 words. "Mercy, you first." Vorn's breath caught in his throat. Rax's eyes narrowed as he stepped forward, recognizing the voice immediately. "That's Cade. Captain Elias Cade, the human who had spearheaded countless operations against Zarnathian forces. His name had become legend among the Empire's soldiers, a ghost who appeared on every battlefield but was never captured. Vorn's hands trembled. He intercepted our surrender. The message wasn't a refusal. It was a reminder. Humans remembered. They remembered the orbital bombardments, the colonies that burned, the innocent lives lost when the Zarnathians had tried to teach Earth a lesson. And now, when the tables had turned, humanity had no intention of showing the mercy it had been denied to them. Advisor Kell's voice trembled. What do we do now, Chancellor?" Vorn's gaze drifted to the distant evacuation ships, their engines flickering as they disappeared into the void. "We pray," he whispered, "and we hope that when they reach this world, they remember how to stop." Across the vastness of space, aboard the command ship Vindicator, Captain Elias Cade stood at the helm. The message from Zarnath Prime flashed across his screen, but he dismissed it with a flick of his hand. His eyes remained locked on the glowing sphere of the Zarnathian homeworld ahead. "Orders, Captain," one of his officers asked. Cade's expression was unreadable. He remembered the screams of Earth's colonies when the Zarnathians first arrived. He remembered the faces of those left behind, and the names of every friend he had lost. But as the mighty fleet behind him awaited his command, Cade spoke softly. "Hold position." The officers exchanged nervous glances, but obeyed without question. The unstoppable force that had torn through the Zarnathian Empire now stood silent at the gates of its capital. Because sometimes the greatest show of strength was choosing not to strike. The final confrontation, the silence before battle, is the heaviest sound in the universe. From the bridge of the Vindicator, Captain Elias Cade gazed at the shimmering blue curve of Zarnath Prime. The jewel of the Zarnathian Empire rotated slowly beneath them, its continents lit by sprawling cities that stretched across entire landmasses. Behind him, the human fleet hung in formation, dozens of warships, scared and weathered from years of relentless combat. They weren't pristine vessels. Each ship bore the marks of every battle fought to reach this point. But their firepower and the resolve of those who commanded them made them unstoppable. The Zarnathians knew this. Their fleet waited in orbit, shimmering with the polished elegance of a species that had never truly known defeat until now. Towering dreadnoughts, sleek cruisers, and squadrons of nimble fighters held position in front of their homeworld like a final wall of steel. But even from a distance, Cade could see the cracks in their lines. Formation errors, delays in ship movement, signs of fear. "They're terrified," Lieutenant Morrow muttered beside him, scanning the enemy fleet. "Can't say I blame them." Cade remained silent. The bridge hummed with quiet tension. Every officer knew what this moment meant. They had fought too hard to stop now. This was the culmination of everything, the final blow that would bring the Empire to its knees. But Cade couldn't shake the weight pressing down on his chest. On the Zarnathian flagship Eclipse, General Rax stood on the observation deck, watching the human fleet with grim resignation. His officers whispered anxiously behind him. Some quietly suggested retreat, others urged negotiation. But Rax knew better. There was nowhere left to run. The humans would not accept surrender, not after what had been done to them. "Signal the fleet," Rax ordered, his voice low and steady. "Prepare to engage." A young officer hesitated. "Sir, if we fight, we won't survive." Rax's grip tightened on the railing. "Then we make them pay for every inch they take." Across the fleet, Zarnathian ships powered their weapons. Shields hummed to life, and engines flared as battle formations tightened. The Empire's final stand had begun. On the Vindicator, the bridge remained quiet as human officers watched the Zarnathians move into attack formation. "They're not backing down," Morrow said, frowning. "I thought they'd surrender by now." Cade's eyes narrowed. They know they can't win. But pride. He exhaled softly. Pride can push even the wisest to make foolish decisions. He leaned forward, activating the fleet-wide communication channel. "This is Captain Cade to all ships. Hold your fire." Morrow spun toward him. "Sir." Cade's expression was calm, but there was a quiet intensity in his voice. "We didn't come here to slaughter cowards standing at the edge of ruin." Morrow hesitated. "With respect, Captain, this is our chance to finish it. If we stop now." Cade cut him off with a glance. "They already know they've lost," he said. "This isn't about vengeance anymore." A heavy silence followed. The officers on the bridge exchanged uncertain looks. The fleet had fought tooth and nail to reach this moment. For years, they had pushed forward, driven by memories of burning colonies and fallen comrades. But now, facing the heart of their enemy, Cade's order felt different. Morrow stepped forward, lowering his voice. "They burned our worlds, Elias. Do you really think they deserve mercy?" Cade's gaze drifted back to the planet below. "No," he admitted. But mercy isn't for them. Morrow's brow furrowed. Cade's voice softened. It's for us. On the Eclipse, Rax stood frozen as he watched the human fleet do nothing. The warships held position, their weapons idle. Minutes passed, then hours. They're waiting, one of Rax's officers whispered in disbelief. Rax couldn't tear his eyes away from the display. Waiting. For what? His fists clenched at his sides. The humans could have annihilated them by now. They had every advantage, every reason to destroy what remained of the Zarnathian fleet. And yet, they waited. Finally, Rax stepped forward and gave the order he had never imagined himself speaking. Stand down. One by one, Zarnathian ships powered down their weapons. The great wall of steel that once protected the Empire faded away. Back on the Vindicator, Morrow exhaled slowly as the Zarnathian fleet surrendered. It's over, he said quietly. Cade nodded, though his expression remained distant. It was over before we got here, he replied. As the human fleet drifted quietly above Zarnath Prime, the war came to its silent conclusion, not with fire, but with restraint. And in that moment, humanity's greatest victory was not in the destruction they had wrought, but in the destruction they had chosen to stop. A lesson in strength. The skies above Zarnath Prime shimmered with the soft glow of human warships as they held position in silent triumph. No weapons fired, no cities burned. The empire that had once terrorized the galactic frontier now lay defenseless beneath the shadow of those they once deemed inferior. From the bridge of the Vindicator, Captain Elias Cade watched the planet rotate beneath him. The war was over, but the weight in his chest had not lifted. Lieutenant Morrow approached carefully. Sir, Zarnath Prime is hailing us again. Chancellor Vorn requests another audience. Cade didn't immediately respond. His gaze lingered on the distant horizon, where the remnants of the Zarnathian fleet drifted, lifeless and scarred. The silence of victory was louder than the battles that had come before. Patch him through, Cade said at last. The holodeble flickered to life, revealing the worn and tired face of Chancellor Vorn. The once imposing Zarnathian leader no longer carried himself with the authority of a ruler. His eyes were sunken, his scales dulled, and the pride that once defined him had long since vanished. Captain Cade, Vorn began, his voice strained. You have achieved what no other species has. The Zarnathian Empire stands at your mercy. He hesitated. I will not beg for my people's survival. I know the atrocities we have committed. I know the lives we have taken. If retribution is what you seek, I will not stand in the way. Cade's expression remained neutral. Morrow stiffened beside him. Sir, this is it. We can end them. The Empire will never threaten another colony again. But Cade raised his hand, silencing him. Chancellor, Cade said, his voice even and steady, you're right. You won't beg, and I don't expect you to. He stepped forward, closer to the projection, until his eyes locked with Vorn's. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to make sure you remember why we're still standing, and why you aren't. Vorn's brow furrowed. You would spare us, after everything we've done. Cade's gaze hardened. Spare isn't the word I'd use. Restrain, maybe. Supervise. But this isn't mercy, Chancellor. It's a lesson. The holodeble flickered, displaying detailed schematics of the Zarnathian military installations, starports, and weapons facilities across the Empire. One by one, they were marked in red, decommissioned, dismantled, or placed under human control. We'll strip your war machine to the bones, Cade continued. Every dreadnought, every fleet command center. You will not rebuild. Your military will become a shadow of what it once was. Vorn's face darkened, but he said nothing. And in return, Cade added, humanity will ensure that no empire, not yours or any other, will threaten the colonies again. Morrow stepped closer, lowering his voice. Cade, if we leave them standing, they could rise again. You're giving them a second chance. Cade's gaze didn't shift. "No," he replied quietly. "I'm giving us a second chance." In the following weeks, human forces landed on Zarnath Prime, not as conquerors, but as custodians. Massive starports, once symbols of Zarnathian power, were dismantled piece by piece. The Empire's military academies were repurposed into trade centers and research facilities. Dreadnoughts were scrapped, their remains used to construct new orbital stations under human oversight. The Zarnathian people watched in silence as the empire that once ruled them unraveled. Cade personally oversaw the decommissioning of Zarnath Prime's Central War Station. As the final reactor was shut down, Advisor Kell approached him on the platform. "You've shown more restraint than most would," Kell said, watching the station's lights flicker out. "But I wonder, are you not afraid we will rise again?" Cade shook his head. "I expect it." Kell raised a brow. Cade's eyes narrowed as he looked over the horizon. "Every empire rises again, eventually. But when you do, you'll remember this day. You'll remember that humans could have wiped you out, but didn't. That memory will shape what you become next." Kell was silent for a long moment before nodding. Perhaps that's a lesson we needed to learn. Years later, as the scars of war faded, the galaxy remembered. The Zarnathian Empire never fully recovered its former strength, but instead of rebuilding fleets, they rebuilt alliances. Their people, once proud conquerors, became diplomats and scholars. And humanity. Humanity became a symbol, not of destruction, but of resilience. The Deathworlders who had shattered the Empire's might had proven that strength wasn't just measured by the wars you win, but by the ones you choose not to fight.